right. So welcome to this episode of Yoga Entrepreneur Secrets. Today we are super excited to have a special guest, Cate Stillman, on. Just a little backstory. Cate is a best-selling author about Ayurveda and yoga in her book called Body Thrive. She's the founder of Yogahealer and the founder of Yoga Health Coaching. And she has been in the yoga entrepreneurial space for a good time now. So we're super excited to pick her brain and find out how she came to be who she is and how she's been so successful.
Yeah, welcome, Cate. Welcome, Cate.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Chris and John.
Awesome. So let's. I would love to give our listeners just kind of an insight into who you are, how you came to be. So what's your backstory? How did you become who you are today?
Yeah. So before I went into holistic healing, I was more or less an international environmental activist and working in the field of global environmental policy and politics, and just my desire to help be part of the solution rather than part of the problem led me to working in international environmental energy efficiency in Washington, D.C. And from there, I kind of just woke up to that. For me, it was going to be more about raising human consciousness than changing policy and politics. And so that really brought me into Ayurveda, which is the healing science behind yoga. And just this very much like, how do we awaken people into the five elements, into earth and into sky and into fire and water and air, and get us like back in touch with what then became the rewilding movement of how do we awaken humans that they are their ecosystem, and if we take care of our ecosystem, we naturally take care of ourselves, and vice versa. And that's really what led me into Ayurveda. And those who have studied Ayurveda, there's the saying that, on the other side of Ayurveda is yoga, if you have a coin, and on the other side of yoga is Ayurveda. So if you penetrate one enough, or if you're in one of those fields long enough, like you end up flipping over the coin and discovering the other. So if yoga is this path of enlightenment, which includes asana, right? And includes meditation and pranayama, and it includes the study of the yamas and niyamas and the whole eightfold path. On the other side of that is, how do you keep your body attuned and alive and vibrant and aligned through the various phases and cycles of life in the various ecosystems and climates that we live in? Like, how do we navigate that so that we actually have a lot of resilience? Because yoga, the practice of yoga, actually relies on resilience. And that healing path is Ayurveda. For people that come to yoga sick, they should quickly kind of move into the Ayurvedic side of things until they're thriving, and then they can really do a much deeper exploration of yoga.
Yeah. I'm interested in DC. Did you feel like the impact you were making in that world was limited, and you wanted to pivot, or was there something that, like, I don't know, I think of DC of like, oh my God, like high stress, super, like political, obviously, and very, like
divisive and hard to get anything really done, hitting roadblocks all the time. I mean, it was like the stress levels of like that experience. Like, well, I guess talk about the like that kind of external experience of it first. Of like, was that the reality for you when you were in DC?
I think to me, the reality was more that, like, if humans were more conscious, we wouldn't need policy. I mean, I think fundamentally it just came down to that level of awareness of, like, I think we're, the carrot and stick method versus like, what if you don't need carrots and sticks? Like, anyone who's raising a child that's really aware, like, there's a lot of conversations that you just don't even need to have. Right, because there's a certain understanding on the level of values and ethos that then regulate behavior. I think it's just easy to understand with a kid. Like, if, like, in our family, one of our values is that we're excellent roommates. We're just excellent roommates, right? So that takes care of like a lot of things, of like picking your stuff up around the house, or putting your dishes in the dishwasher, or doing your own laundry, or keeping common spaces clear of your crap, and that's behavior. So that's, I think, really fundamentally where I got in DC was like, why are we working at the level of behavior rather than the level of consciousness that's creating these behaviors? Mm-hmm. And when I just looked at like myself personally and where my life work should go, I realized that it should probably go at the level of shifting consciousness.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, it's the core of what yoga is doing is changing the individual and how they see themselves. And when you change that, everything else changes. Your whole paradigm changes. And then that's the way, like if you look at any big social movements, social changes that have happened in the past, it's always in the grassroots individual level where it starts. So you felt like you can make more impact on that side of it.
Yeah.
Was there some pressure point, Cate, that you felt? Was there some like major, what's the word? A breaking point, like the last straw? Was there like one thing that was like, all right, I'm done with this whole DC stuff, I need to pivot it? Was there like one thing you were like, all right, I'm off the mic on this part of my life and transition out?
This is good. So I had I was pretty divided going into it, right? Like I knew enough about myself. I'm very driven. I knew I was an impact junkie, from my teen years. I knew that, like, the core of me. I knew my core of like who I was and what I was here to do from probably a younger age than a lot of people do. And so part of that, though, I also wanted to really have a full life. And so I already knew that, like, I grew up on the East Coast. I knew I was going to like be a ski bum at some point in the Rockies too. And like really like live I'm very athletic and out, kind of adrenaline junkie, old school style, without like all the motorized stuff, but like ski fast, bike fast, snowboard, like all that stuff. And so it was more of that, of just looking like, if I'm not healthy and thriving in this environment, then obviously like my ideas are only going to be so good. And simultaneously, I was also really studying, self-studying. I'd been studying like diet and like Diet for a Small Planet type stuff, and Fit for Life, and that whole movement of like how a healthy individual and a healthy planet coincide. I'd been self-studying that for over a decade before I went into yoga at all, and then learned Reiki and whatnot. So I think all of those things together, it was just like, I actually, it was cool. It was 1996. My nonprofit, which was a super effective nonprofit I was working for in Washington, D.C. So it wasn't that frustrating on the bureaucracy side. We were actually getting amazing work done in all these developing countries. But, at the end of the day, I was like, can I just take my laptop and telecommute? And that's what it was called in 1996. It was called telecommuting. It's called because you were using a phone, right? You plug the internet into a phone line. Yeah, those were the days. Yeah. So I didn't have to totally leave that while I started to really explore Ayurveda and yoga, and then ultimately devoted my life to Ayurveda and yoga.
So how was it through your self-studies that you were like the first glimpse of Ayurveda, and like, did it capture you immediately?
Yeah.
What was kind of the courting period?
It did, but it was tricky because like I was studying energy policy in China, and I'd studied Chinese language quite a bit. And so like the move to go towards Chinese medicine versus Ayurveda, like I'd already put in some time. I mean, anyone who studied Chinese language knows that like it's not an easy language for Americans to learn. So it was pretty tough, like on the on this intellectual front, but on an intuitive front, I knew like Ayurveda. What the beauty of it is there's not what in Chinese medicine has like a lot of like white coat syndrome, where you go to a traditional Chinese medicine doctor or acupuncturist, and they're like they know. And then they treat. And what I love about Ayurveda is it's and we're going to awaken your ability to know yourself. And that, I mean, that really is, to me, it's like the definition of Ayurveda is know this life. And part of this life is know yourself. And so it basically puts all the empowerment back into the individual, puts all the responsibility to heal back onto the individual. And if we look at that even in terms of our yards, like, are we composting? Are we planting plants in our, and those who don't have a yard, like, are you doing on the kitchen counter, your patio balcony? Like, are you creating an ecosystem in which you can thrive, which includes an ecosystem of plants? And this is part of know yourself and know your life. And Ayurveda has always just been like just uncompromising in that. I think actually I should edit that a bit. Like how it's practiced in India currently today is following allopathy. So anyone who's seeing more of an Indian Ayurvedic doctor is going to see its practice like allopathy, but the core of the teachings and the philosophy of Ayurveda are very intrinsically around awakening someone to self-healing.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think there's this natural tendency for humans to want to give their power to somebody else, to tell them what is wrong with me. And I think it's like, and on a religious sense, it's on a health sense. I mean, and I think people, like our mom was always raised like, you don't know, find someone who knows and they will tell you how to be. And this is what yoga is really flipping on its head, and Ayurveda specifically. Oh, who should know your body more than you? Who should know your story more than you? And understanding that, I think, is the key to, it's like this, it's the difference in Carolyn Mace's book, Anatomy of the Spirit. She talks about like true healing versus curing. You can go to a doctor, they can cure you of something, but healing happens on an individual internal basis. Yeah. So what was that experience like for you going? Because you went to India, you were there and you studied Ayurveda and you became, I don't know how the certifying process works. Tell us about that and your experience.
So I went to the California College of Ayurveda and I went to the Iyengar Yoga Institute at the same time. They were both 2-year training programs. Iyengar Yoga teacher training, and then Ayurveda becoming a clinical Ayurvedic specialist. And then I went to India to study with Dr. Vasant Lad, who's like a great Ayurvedic doctor in the United States. He has a Gurukula program, which is like he creates a kula around the guru, right? So you have a small community. That's what kula means, community of the heart. Guru is someone who's weighty with light, right? And so he takes a small group to India every year, and basically we watch him practice, both in the city and in the country, and learn. And he lectures. It's a very small group, and so I was in that. And I did a few other, just studied with a few other Indian doctors over there, and just kind of saw how it was practiced, and came back and realized that, it was really fascinating. I had started running because of my yoga Ayurveda overlap, I was constantly going back and forth, and I saw what the Iyengar yoga teachers didn't know about Ayurveda that they should know in terms of like the daily routines of a yogi, which is what has become Body Thrive, my first book, and has become the core curriculum for the yoga health coaches who are teaching habits of yogis around the world and behavioral science and like how you actually get someone to change their habits in a culture that's going counterculture to those habits. But like back then, what I discovered is I would create these little programs, and one of them was the Yogi Detox, and it's still live today. We're actually just on a closing call. We run it every October, and every April, hundreds of people come together from around the world and go through basically an at-home retreat. But I started running these in a small yoga studio in 2002, and I ran them twice a year at least. Now we're down to twice a year. And what I realized is in my Ayurvedic medicine practice, when I was seeing people one-on-one and going more through the like, here's a diagnosis from an Ayurvedic perspective, or like here's the pathogenesis, here's some herbs, a special formula particular to you, here's how it works with your digestion, here's the yoga routine specific to you, here's all these therapies. So it's very personalized, specialized program. They would actually not progress towards their desired end results nearly as rapidly as just a group of people going through a yogi detox. And that's where I learned the power of groups. And I think any yoga teacher knows this. Like, there's a difference to going to a studio live and practicing with a group than there is at home, especially with someone who's a very good yoga teacher. Like, there's an experience, there's a momentum, it really affects your consciousness. Mm-hmm. And that was just one of the big take homes coming back from India, is like, my yoga detoxes they were cheap too. And they still are. They're like around, $200 to $300 depending on when someone signs up. That investment and the amount of transformation that can take place versus seeing a practitioner one-on-one and getting this really specialized program, the efficacy is just like sky high with our group programs.
So wild, Kate. There's such power in accountability is what I'm getting from that. Of like when you move through a process with a group of people, you put yourself, the group holds a higher standard than the individual. And so we want to succeed in our goal with each other, and we help each other in that process of succeeding towards that goal way more than we do as an individual, even if, like you said, even if what we're getting is so specific to us and so so even given to us by some profound teacher, a lot of times we're like, I'll do it a couple days and all right, I kind of lost my gusto. But with a group of people, it just drives us to the end goal. So that's really cool. Really cool to hear what you're experiencing with that.
Yeah, it's how we're wired biologically. That group connection. We want to belong, and we hold each other accountable to each other more so. So how did you go from? So in our last conversation, you said you've been online for 10 years now, completely online, your business. How did you go from you're doing the yoga detoxes at yoga studio to where you are now? Kind of tell us about that path. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. So if I look back, there's so many different, I think this is true for so many yoga teachers and wellness pros, is that like you have a number of different income streams. And they all work. So I like if I go back to 10 plus years ago, I owned a yoga studio by then. I had an herbal product line. I had my yoga detoxes. I was doing private retreats where I'd like fly in for a wealthy client or two and do like a deep Ayurvedic detox program. I was a yoga teacher, so I had public yoga classes. I was doing some workshops aside from all that. Like I'm naturally a curriculum creator. I've been a curriculum creator since I started in this field. Like the first, like optimal weight, optimal energy, year 2000, habits of a yogi, like 2000, for 19 years now I've been and I keep creating curriculum. I can't seem to stop doing that. And now the curriculum becomes the books, which is really nice. Like there's just this really easy. So I had all of these, I'm like trying to think, I'm sure there were like 5 other income streams I had. And it was everything was working. Everything was making money. And then I realized I wanted to be, just part of that whole Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week, that movement. When I read that book, it definitely changed. It just like overnight, I'm like, okay, I'm going to give myself 2 years to pivot.
Yeah.
So I had all this stuff. I was practicing in Sun Valley, Jackson Hole, and Teton Valley, Idaho. I had a whole like racket set up, and I was earning well, like way better than most yoga teachers and wellness pros even do now. I was earning really well then. And I just I grew up in a techie household. My dad worked in the computer industry from when it was like mainframes. He talks about like the whole punch card thing. And it's amazing. My sister had her master's in geographical information systems by the time she was 23. And we were on email in 1993, 1994 as a family. So there wasn't a barrier to entry. And my dad put a lot of pressure on me. I was like, look how successcul I am because he was like, what the heck are you doing with your life? Like, I was on a track to be a doctor, a lawyer,
Right.
or a stockbroker, and here I am like, I'm going to go into saving the world, Dad. And this is how I'm going to do it. So he just kept saying like, where's the leverage in your business? And I was kind of like, super frustrated. Like, look how successful I am compared to all my friends who can't make a living at this. Like I'm making a living at this. And he was really, my dad's a tough guy. He self-evaluates as a tough Jew from Brooklyn. Like his parents were immigrants from Russia and Poland, like just a tough life. And he just like from a business perspective kept looking at what I was doing and say, there's no leverage anywhere. He couldn't see any leverage anywhere where I could leverage my time for impact or for income. And, when I go back to like, was it to impress my dad or was it like just because he was totally right and I was curious about business? And I've always had a head for business. I just gave myself 2 years. I said, in 2 years, I will be 100% online and they'll be leverageable. So every decision I made, and they were hard. And I just want anyone listening, like those of you who are driven, who are ambitious, who have, pitta in the mind, and you're attuning that to what in yoga is called tejas, or Ayurveda is called tejas, this like discriminate power of the mind to say yes to something, meaning saying no to everything else that's not in line with that yes. It's a fiery path and it's not fun. Like just to be super direct, like you have to say no to the clients that have supported you to get from there to here. They're not happy. You're not happy. You have to say no to the yoga students. You have to say no to, all of the things that are the old way in order to free up time to develop the next thing. And I did that, and it was hard. And I was as gracious, and some people came with me online. I'd say about 2%, maybe 3%. But, as a result, I went from having, a small self-employed business that was probably in around 100K, 150K a year to scaling over $1 million business that's online and leverageable and has this huge global impact in all these yoga health coaches around the world and their communities. So, trade-offs, right?
Yeah, right, totally, Kate. But this is such a beautiful story because this is where yoga teachers, this is what they want right now. Like when people finish training, they're like, is it possible? Do I have to open up a studio? Do I have to go hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to open up a studio and do that path? And then they look at the online path and like, well, there's so much competition. There's always excuses, right? There's so much competition. There's so much stuff out there. Like I can't, how am I actually going to do anything online? And then instead of, like you said, you took 2 years to really study and learn how to shift this, to make the pivot. They get crazy. They get these ideas of, I just need to go social every once in a while and go on my and do some social stuff online, and then I'll build this huge following and be able to make $1 million and be done, and be able to travel the world doing yoga. And so it's a challenge because there's so many reality checks for them as they start to move in that direction. But you hit the nail on the head when it takes a person with such drive, because the whole path of an entrepreneur is failure, right? It's like, I'm going to fail, and then I'm going to get back up and do it again, and I'm going to fail. I'll get back up and do it again. I'm going to fail. And so it's an intense process.
Yeah. And I would just say that like, a true yogi has an unfair advantage to all the other entrepreneurs out there, because yoga is the path of fire.
Yeah.
Yoga is the path where you're willing to look at your own ego and old definition of the self and drop it for freedom and really pursue who you could be instead of who you have been. And the other unfair advantage that us yogis have is that we understand self-care. I mean, when I speak with other entrepreneurs in all different types of industries, I have such an unfair advantage because my whole developmental practice with yoga and Ayurveda is rooted in building deep resilience, deep self-accountability, deeper and deeper levels of self-healing and ability to cultivate a much deeper energy, which in Ayurveda is called ojas. So I'm like, you guys, if we can't do it, don't expect anyone else to.
Totally.
But I also want to say, like, what yoga teachers often want too is we want a lucrative lifestyle. Like, usually people come to yoga. What I notice is that they have a deep level of care and they're smart, right? Like it's not the easiest path if we're really going to go deep in yoga. But we want a lucrative lifestyle. Like we understand abundance, and that's where the lucrative comes in. And then on the lifestyle component, we get that if we're not in sync, then everything we do will be out of sync. And we understand that like the energy that comes from source perpetuates, and that we want to be in alignment with that. And so, in yoga health coaching, what we've done is created like a very simple system, like a very simple business model for people to have a lucrative lifestyle. And I think what's really important for a lot of people listening to realize is like, you don't have to work with that many people, and you don't even have to do social if you don't want to. If you have a higher price point and you have deep care and you have a package where you can get people to their results and you do it in a group, like you really only need to work with somewhere between 15 to 50 people a year. It's just not that many if you have the right business model.
Yeah. When did you start helping yoga coaches, and when did you start like the yoga health coach?
Yeah. Yoga health coaching began in 2012, but I started the Yogahealer Business School somewhere around, I need to go back and look, but it was probably 3 years before that. I started a yoga teacher mentoring program, and that evolved into the Yogahealer Business course, which we then dissolved as we grew yoga health coaching, which is really like a wellness pro academy. So we have all different types of wellness professionals. 50% are yoga teachers or Ayurvedic medicine practitioners, and then the other 50% are like all over the board, from like personal trainers, nurses, doctors, naturopathy, body workers. I mean, just you name it. So it's a very dynamic, diverse community. Lots of mental health therapists come in, and we teach them this very simple business model in real time. So they implement it in real time with us, and it's not short. It's 27 months because there's so much training. that they need in order to have this lucrative lifestyle and in order to get people to results faster, which is, we're more or less after both. If it's not sustainable for you, your work in the world isn't going to be that great. But if you're not getting people to results, then like, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah, totally. What's I'm really interested. So you have these people in the wellness community coming into your yoga health coaching program. What's their biggest obstacle initially? Is it like, are they not practicing the self-care? Is it a business, a lack of understanding? What do you find is the main thing you actually have to work with people?
Yeah, it's a great, really good question, because we always tell people coming in, like, you'll make an amazing yoga health coach. Like, and we don't really care what you call yourself, but like, you'll get people to results way faster than you ever have. And they're so good at that. And that part of it, the like how to create a great coach, like that's the easiest part. We don't, you know what I mean? Like, and it's the funnest part. And some for them, like the funnest part for me is definitely teaching them the business structure and the sales, and a little bit of marketing. Because, if you only need to make 15 to 50 sales a year, it really changes how you might even consider marketing, and what marketing even becomes. So the real work is like just enough leads to make just enough sales to get just enough people to the desired end result. And once they have that down, it gains traction. But it's definitely talking to people.
Yeah. Having a conversation.
Which really means listening.
Right.
Which is so hard for people these days, Kate. They're so distracted.
And I will also say, there's a lot of introverts in the yoga community where, like, it's funny because I can be on, like, we do teacher trainings where, like 20 people, and I don't have a problem speaking. But when I'm one-on-one, sometimes I'm like, oh, this is a little more challenging to navigate than speaking one-to-many. And I wonder if, like, those are the people that you find in your community, which is more introverted, less inclined to speak one-on-one to people.
We're super diverse. So I feel like we've got all types. That's definitely a pattern. The person that's like great on stage, but like can't do a one-on-one conversation. But there's, more of it, what I find is helping them realize that what they know, there has to be a process of like how someone can come into their knowledge and really gain from it. And that it seems intuitive, and it's really not. And so going through a very step-by-step process for how they can really help people get to results, like all of the work done in that, it's a lot. And it takes them about like the first year, they earn, most of them earn their tuition back for the whole 27-month course, because we force it. We force them to force learning in terms of what they have to do step by step, so that it immediately highlights the stuff that they don't want to do. And it's different for the different people. Like some people like don't want to just like reach out and tell people what they're doing.
Yeah.
Other people, it's like don't want to speak in front of a group. Other people, you know what I mean? It's like so diverse. Other people, like they have the perfect person, like they can really help, who really needs their help. And that's really understood. And they just can't actually charge what they need to charge for the person to have enough skin in the game to work the process with them. Yeah. So, I mean, and then other people can do that, but then they can't onboard the person. Like they can't deal with what happens next and next and next. So we try to help them build a very simple, reliable process. That's awesome. Around. Yeah.
It's so great because it's, you're aligning your business with actually creating success for these people that are going out and changing lives. So it's like, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. I mean, people that do teacher trainings do the same thing, but there's a level of once the teachers go out, so many of them, they'll get into a studio and get and start making a little money that way, but then realize that, okay, I can't make a sustainable living doing this. So I need to do something else. And that something else is when they hit the biggest roadblocks. And at that point is a lot of times when they go back to their 9 to 5 or go back to their other business and kind of give up, don't have enough time to do yoga anymore, which is so, it's one of the passions for Chris and I is to help shift that. And that sounds like that's where you are, just so beautiful. I want to ask, part of your part of your mastery, Cate, is aligning daily schedules with natural biorhythms. Would you speak to that a little bit because entrepreneurs in general and yoga entrepreneurs, it's like you described in the beginning. You have 10 things going on. You have all these different income streams, and then family on top of it all, and kids and everything you're juggling. How talk to us about aligning your schedule with the natural biorhythms a little bit, because I think that'll be a huge takeaway for.
Yeah. And there's images in this in bodythrive.com. There's a workbook. There's a free workbook, and there's images in there. So if anyone listening could just go there and like print the dosha clock, and there's a bunch of worksheets in there too that can really kind of help people realign. So dinacharya is the daily wheel, this daily rhythm that is just a backbone of Ayurveda. It's a backbone of yoga. You can see like you can see BKS Iyengar writing in a light on yoga. A lot of people have that on their shelves. And if you pay attention in the beginning where he talks about the sadhaka, so sadhaka refers to in Ayurveda sadhaka pitta, which is it's kind of the mind-heart connection of the force of transformation in the body. So there's a mental element to each of the doshas. There's Tarapaka Kapha, which holds the memory. There's Prana Vayu, which many of you know, which is how prana feels in the body, and this connection to like, it involves my brain and my heart. Well, the function of pitta, which is the force of transformation, is the sadhaka. And the sadhaka has to decipher like all the bullshit from the true path. And that's the goal. So in that practice over thousands of years, it became pretty evident that there's a way to align to the rhythm of the planet for human beings, and it's different. I'm always like, my cat is a feline, is not a primate. Like, he is a different schedule. He comes in at 4 a.m. and he's like, I'm like going to bed, and I've been in bed since 9 p.m. Right? So he's on a different path. So for primates, what the yogis discovered is that we digest best when there's the most bile in our body. We digest best when the sun's highest in the sky. So we eat during daylight. Like my cat does not care about looking at his food. He just doesn't care at all. Like, he doesn't even care what the food looks like. His food prep is like kill, eat, skin, bone. I mean, it's disgusting. He's very vocal eater. It's gross. We live in the country, so he hunts all the time. Whereas like me and you, like, we like to see our food. Like, we actually take enjoyment from seeing our food. We need daylight, pre-electricity. We need daylight to see, to ingest, and to digest. So when we eat more of our calories in the daylight hours, what happens is we naturally get tired earlier in the evening. Now, we're often in a cycle now, like Netflix says their biggest competitor is sleep, and that's true, right? A lot of people are they're wired and tired, they're staying up too late, and when you do that, you're burning energy from the next day, which is basically, you're breaking down your immune system over time if you have that habit, which means you'll have allergies, you'll have food allergies, and you'll have, some sort of like autoimmune thing or cancer. Like, that's sort of the trajectory. There's a really great modern book on that written from an allopathic perspective called An Elegant Defense. That's all about immunology and the defense of our bodies and what's going on. And he ends up with the same conclusion that Ayurveda's reached, which is like, stuff breaks down. When stuff breaks down, you lose resilience, cellular intelligence. So eating earlier, going to bed earlier. There's a reason in any religious or existentialist tradition, there's a waking before the dawn, because there's more access to spirit. There's more access to universal energy, to the great unknown, to the big right? That happens before the dawn. And if you sleep through that, you're going to have a mundane day. You're going to be less in touch with your own intuition. You're going to be less in touch with your own body's biorhythms. But if you wake earlier, there's a natural impulse to wake up, splash cold water on your face, drink some water. There's a natural impulse to eliminate, and which is basically like having a complete bowel movement within an hour. These are just very natural functions that align your whole being for the day. And then what the yogis like to do, and really is a natural impulse, you'll see children do it, is move. Is we move before we eat. We actually open the channels of prana in the body before we ingest anything, right? Before we add something in, we first just take in oxygen, and we actually clear out tamasic energy, or that heavy, dull energy. You'll also see in any kind of yogic textbook where they talk about the 3 main gunas. So these little things, that's what my first book, Body Thrive's all about. It just breaks dinacharya into 10 really simple habits. It starts with today rather than tomorrow, because we can all put off tomorrow, and then tomorrow never comes. But we can all take action today, just by eating a little later in the day today, going to bed a little earlier, not using technology after, when you're done with work, like try to be done before 6 and be done. Like just, you get to take a technological break till tomorrow. Don't bring your cell phone to bed. Like don't wake up and check email. Like give your system a whole chance to be aligned, and then you'll have the power of focus. And the power of focus, there's great books on this. They've had a number of podcasts with really great people on this. The last one was with Brian Solis, who's a digital anthropologist, his book Life Scale, where he really goes into the science of like what's happening with humans and technology, and how you want to use time, how you want to use technology to live an optimal life. I think there's a million references to this stuff. You all know them who are listening. Give yourself a chance to really do your deepest, most focused work by also not using technology at certain times a day, not using food at certain times a day, and really observing that your body needs very, very deep rest that has to happen before 10 p.m. Like you've got to wind down before 10 p.m. to hit your deepest chance at REM, which is like your body's biggest ability to rebuild. And then you'll start tomorrow right.
Yeah, I've heard that between 10 and 12 are the golden hour. It's the golden sleep time. Like you want to be asleep at that time, because it's where you hit REM sleep, and it's so vital. So I want to just highlight for our listeners what Cate's saying is that this, like, not only following these natural rhythms does it give us the ability not to get sick but also to have focus, but to literally be more productive throughout our day, to be more focused and get better things done, be more intuitive with ourselves, understanding we're out of balance, but being able to put together our life, literally design our life. So we're not we're not tired, we're not using caffeine to get stimulated to try to keep it going and eventually break down, but to really follow that natural rhythm of life, a natural rhythm of our bodies, so that we are thriving and productive and literally build our dreams. So for those of you who can't, Cate just dropped the mic on that one. It was good.
Cate, before we end, I want to ask, what's the next level for you? Like, where do you see like your business going? Where do you see your life going? Like a few 3 years, 5 years out?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a cool place in my business, and with our global community, and with the team, and there's a certain maturation. I started podcasting really back there around 2007. We didn't have an official show till 2012, and just seeing like things gain momentum, and relationships with the different people I've hosted over the last decade gain momentum. And so we have a book release happening in March, Master of You, which is it's a Dharma book for how to empower yourself with the 5 elements, so that you are continually creating the next chapter of your life in alignment with your potential, in alignment with your ambition, while also experiencing greater levels of flow and more time. So that's coming out. We're going to do a big tour next year, and the year after we're going to do a really big event. So we'll have our first like really large scale event for the greater Yogahealer community and some of our like network partners, and it's exciting. In this next year, what's happening in yoga health coaching is it's really starting to grow rapidly. And I can just mention, for anyone who wants to check out the business model, there's a free workshop at yogahealthcoaching.com/masterclass. And that masterclass kind of gives people an idea of like how that daily stuff I just talked about, how that fits in with group and how that fits in with the business model. And I kind of just walk through it, and then you can talk to someone on my team about it and see if it would work. But that's getting really exciting to see how the global network of health coaches, of our yoga health coaches, is just, they're collaborating and networking and growing in their own communities. And I'm excited just to have the bandwidth to support the growth of the structure of the organization.
That's awesome. Congratulations with all that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So where else, before we have 2 more things. Before, where else can they reach out to you if they're interested in more? Is that the best?
Yeah, go to watch the masterclass, you guys. Like, there's a lot. Like, it's 40 minutes and it's packed, and it's yogahealthcoaching.com/masterclass. And if you watch that, it'll go right into a chance to schedule a 60-minute career session with one of our coaches. And we really like the way that we do we model everything we do for our yoga health coaches and for our future yoga health coaches. And part of that is like showing you the community that you're going to enter before you enter it. So there's a lot of conversations with people in the community already. And part of that is like, I mean, I think we've all had that like yoga class where that person's come in that like really was in some way, shape, or form, like not able to adjust to the vibe, right? And like, and sometimes it's just not a fit. And so because this is it's a big deal to rewire your business model and to, really look at doubling or tripling your revenue. So we like to get people really assimilated before they come into before they become a member. And so people get to experience what that's like. It's actually, it's interesting. Like I often go back to like, if I was going to have a yoga studio again, one of the things that I would do is before a student would come into a class is I would sit down and find out like, what are their goals? Why do they want to do yoga? Like what's worked for them in the past? What isn't working for them? When do they want to reach their goals by? Are they like, what's their adhikara? It's such a good Sanskrit word of studentship, right? Are they mild, medium, or hot, just so that we can figure that out. And so that's really where I recommend people start, any yoga teacher or someone who's thinking about being a yoga teacher or wellness pro, is go to yogahealthcoaching.com/masterclass. And you get to have actually an experience of onboarding, which you might not come into our community at all, but I promise you'll learn something for how you want to work with your members.
Excellent.
Or students or clients. Yeah.
So we finish every interview with a speed round. So we're going to do a speed round with you.
I love speed. I get speeding tickets because I love speed.
Adrenaline junkie coming back around.
That's us too. Okay, we mountain bike, we surf, we snowboard, we love Brazilian jiu-jitsu, we love martial arts. So we're right up there with you. But so it's going to start off. We'll go back and forth and throw. It's about 8 questions. So.
Yeah, you just fill in the blank. Here we go. Okay. Ready? My favorite food is
hot water.
The book everyone must read is
Body Thrive.
Nice. Teed that one up for you. I feel most alive when
I go to bed early.
Money is
everywhere.
My number one passion in life is
life.
Freedom means
Svatantriya.
Source is
always available.
When people remember me, they'll say,
she inspired me.
Beautiful, beautiful. Awesome. Well, Cate Stillman, thank you so much for joining us on our on this episode. It was a blessing. It was a pleasure. We enjoyed it very much. Thanks so much, Cate.
Yeah, you bet. Yaks Brothers, Yaks Yoga. I'm psyched. And if you guys ever have other stuff that you want to, that I can be helpful to your yoga teachers and communities, don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. We appreciate it. Thanks so much, Cate.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate you being here. Remember, do the work, honor the struggle, and make the world a better place. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.
Yes. Thanks so much for listening to Yoga Entrepreneur Secrets. Do you have a question that you'd like us to answer raw and uncut on the podcast?
If you want your questions answered, all you need to do is head over to Apple Podcasts and do 3 simple things.
1, rate and review, telling us what you think of the podcast. 2, in that review, ask anything you want related to yoga. And 3, if you want a shout out, leave your Instagram handle or name. And that's it.
Then listen in to hear your question answered live, raw, and uncut.
Join us next time on Yoga Entrepreneur Secrets Podcast.
Thanks.